Welcome, Mr. Daniel, again back
Thank
to
you.
the show. Okay. In the previous interview, we discussed about digital PMO, and we also mentioned about the different types of stakeholders or companies who can, or the projects which can benefit from digital PMO. Based on that, based on your experience, can you share with us the critical success factors for a successful implementation of a digital PMO?
So, let me go back to what kind of project should have a digital PMO. So, any project where there are multiple stakeholders involved require a PMO because you need to coordinate between all of these people. So, that is why we mandate a PMO for it. And since there are multiple stakeholders like owners, contractors, consultants, PMCs, and you have multiple vendors, PMO becomes a necessity to manage such projects. A digital PMO, as I said, just facilitates the PMO to automate the manual activities which a PMO does. So, it does not depend on the type of industry. It can be a metro project or a water treatment project or a oil and gas project, or it can be a building. All in all these there are large number of stakeholders. So, it becomes a necessity to have a digital PMO.
So, if I recollect, recently you had a big win of a manufacturing company, steel manufacturer. So, what do they do with this digital PMO?
So, they also, though they are the manufacturers of this, they build new plans for setting it up, and that requires, they have an internal engineering team, they have a lot of contractors which work with them. They have large number of equipments which are to be produced by different equipment manufacturers and their internal team. So, to coordinate all this, it is absolutely necessary to have a digital PMO so that you can be on top of the project and based on, as I said, it's a third eye of the customer, so it basically helps them in a very big way to prevent projects getting delayed and to prevent cost overrun.
So, when it comes to rolling out digital PMO, what are the key success factors?
So, I would say there are two halves to it. One half is from the input, second is from the output. From an input standpoint, to properly deploy a digital PMO, you need to make sure that you define the process and make everybody use only the system to update it. You cannot be outside the system. So, you have to deploy the system in such a way and connect all the stakeholders on the same platform by giving them access so that they can access their information because they know what is to be done, when it has to be done, and the impact of what they have not done. So, which also means that when you have different vendors and contractors, you need to make sure that you have standard operating procedures. When you sign the commercial agreement with them, you have the SOP which clearly defines that you will need to provide us data through this platform, through the digital PMO platform, so that you don't have to update their work on their behalf. They update their work as they keep doing it so that we can automate a lot of work. And when we make a plan is not a static stuff. Whenever they slip on a plan, we need to, reforecast it and give them a revised forecasted date based on which they should work. So, this is a cyclic activity and it has to be continuously tracked. So, you need to make sure that everybody is on the system. So, what we have done is, some organizations are skeptical about working on the same platform. So, they say, we have our own systems, and then we are okay to connect our systems with yours. But, we don't want to work on your system because when I have an independent system, I am using it to manage my activities, which I am responsible for. So, we have set up Wrench Smart project with the owner and the contractor, and both these Wrench Smart project talk to each other using Wrench Connect, so that there is a full automation between both these systems, so that there is no manual intervention and you can get, you can work very collaboratively. Now, from an input point, these are something which you have to mandate for the success. Second is from the output side, the the owner company or the organization which has implemented this PMO should only have this system for monitoring the project. They should not have any parallel systems. So every review, every discussion, every meeting happens by projecting this on your, either on the screen, on the war room, or wherever you're doing a review, and then you discuss about it. And also, as I said at the beginning, when you make a plan is not a static thing. So whenever you have a slippage or when you find that things are not progressing as per plan, you need to go and reforecast. That reforecasting is catching up on the project, and you have to republish that plan. And that has to be done meticulously by the planners through the system itself. And that information should be conveyed through the system itself to the people who are involved in it, so that they know that we slipped on our first schedule. Now this is a forecasted schedule. So you have your catch-up plan. Everybody knows how are we going to get back to the plan. So that common goal is very clear. And if they slip second time, no problem. You can still go back to the third plan, or maybe the project is has stopped, and then you need to re-baseline it. You need to do that re-baseline through the system. So you could do that baselining back in your planning system, but you should, since we have a bidirectional integration with the planning application like P6 and MS Project, do it there and bring it here. So you need to make sure that, one of the principles that we say is you always work based on a plan. It could be, don't run it on a delayed plan forever and see everything in red. You have a catch-up plan, and that is which makes it successful. So, and then all communication, correspondences, minutes of the meeting, every forms that you fill up for approvals, for permit for construction, or all those digital forms are today possible to be digitized inside our digital PMO. So you should not use an Excel sheet or a parallel system to run those. You may have a system which has already been done. We can integrate with that, but make sure that everything is done through a system so that manual intervention can be avoided. Because the real truth is, you run any system with manual updation will not survive after some time, because it adds additional work to people. So people are going to ask you, do you want me to do the job or keep updating the systems? So if it is done through a system, they just do their job through the system. System captures what they did, the evidence and the actuals and the data. Because today with the digital PMO, we are completely becoming data driven. That data is which is going to give us the most critical information, for using artificial intelligence, machine learning, because all the lessons learned has to be available in data for these tools to work upon and give you patterns and decision making information. So, though we can talk about AI and ML, without data, they can do nothing. So the first process is to digitize all the process, have to get all those information in a systematic manner. Then you use an engine to help you, use AI and machine learning. So to basically sum up, you should have getting all stakeholders on a same system. They all should update the system. That's the input part. Output is you only have one system which is used for monitoring and control, which means forecasting. And you should completely be data driven, which means everybody should update all their activities through a system so that we have all information captured in one system. So these are the primary requirements which are the success factors for an effective implementation of a digital PMO.
And the early decision, in the RFI stage itself, or RFP stage itself, to include digital PMO as a basis for monitoring or compliance purposes for all stakeholders. So that is also crucial.
It should be mandated, which means it should be defined in the tenders that we will be using a digital PMO, and then we will be training you on this, and you need to mandatorily work on it.
Have you worked with organizations where projects went haywire because they did not have a digital PMO in place, and used it as a recovery strategy to bring those projects back?
See, we have set up the system in brownfield projects which were halfway through. But the biggest challenge is we spend a lot of time trying to update the status of the past, which is a lot of labor, So ideally, any projects which is already completed about, beyond for 50% is not worth implementing. We should look at projects ideally not more than 20%, because we can get you can backfill it with all the data, and then you can run the project from there.
And you also operate through the big consulting firms, Big Five.
Right. So Big Fives bring in processes. They bring in the right methodology of doing the defining how the project should be broken down. Again, one more important factor which they can help is, see, we need to basically align the work breakdown structure and the cost breakdown structure. Most of this is never integrated. So if you don't do that, what happens is, when you have a delay, you will not know what is the impact of that on the cost. But if you have a alignment between these two, when your schedule gets delayed, you can see the impact on cost, which is a big relevant information. And also it can even show you what is the impact on your cash flow